The winter had become a living thing. It did not simply cover the mountains with snow. It swallowed roads, buried forests, silenced rivers, and erased every trail that once connected one village to another. Even the wolves had stopped howling. The cold was so deep that sound itself seemed afraid to travel through the frozen air. High above the valley, thick grey clouds hid the morning sun. Snowflakes drifted endlessly through the pine trees, settling on broken branches and abandoned hunting paths. Somewhere inside that endless white wilderness, a lone Omega woman struggled forward. Her name was Eira. A worn wool cloak protected little more than her shoulders, and a leather satchel filled with dried herbs hung against her side. Every few steps she paused to brush snow from low bushes, searching for the last winter roots that could ease fever or stop bleeding. Most people would never have come this far into the forest. But Eira had never been like most people. While the village elders locked away their food and medicine, refusing to help strangers who had fled the northern storms, she continued making quiet journeys into the mountains. If someone was hungry, she shared her bread. If someone was sick, she offered whatever herbs she could gather. It was why many respected her. It was also why many believed she was foolish. The wind suddenly shifted. A strange smell drifted through the trees. Smoke. Blood. Iron. Eira stopped walking. Her fingers tightened around the basket she carried. Something terrible had happened nearby. Following the scent carefully, she climbed over a ridge until the forest opened into a narrow valley. She froze. Below her lay the remains of a destroyed caravan. Several heavy wagons had overturned during the storm. Their wheels were shattered, horses lay frozen beneath blankets of snow, and broken cages were scattered across the ground. The sight alone was enough to make her heart sink. Then she noticed the iron collars. Slave traders. She had heard stories about them for years. They crossed distant territories, kidnapping orphaned wolf children, abandoned Omegas, and anyone too weak to defend themselves. Most villagers pretended not to notice. Others claimed it wasn't their problem. Eira had always hated those stories. Now she stood among their remains. Snow continued falling quietly over the dead. The silence felt wrong. There should have been birds. There should have been wolves. Instead, nothing. As she carefully stepped between the broken wagons, she noticed something unusual. The damage wasn't caused by the storm. Deep claw marks carved through thick wooden beams. Iron bars had been bent apart as though someone had twisted them with impossible strength. Whatever attacked this caravan had been enormous. A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. A weak breath. Eira turned immediately. Near the largest wagon, torn canvas fluttered beneath the wind. Something moved underneath it. She approached slowly. Every instinct warned her to step back. Instead, she reached forward and pulled away the frozen cloth. Her breath caught. An enormous white wolf lay beneath the wagon. His body was unlike anything she had ever seen. Massive shoulders. Thick snow-white fur stained with dark blood. Old scars crossed his back like faded memories. Heavy black chains wrapped around his neck and legs, bolted into iron rings that had once been fixed inside the wagon. Dozens of silver-tipped arrows remained buried beneath his fur. Someone hadn't tried to kill him quickly. They had tried to make him suffer. The wolf wasn't growling. He wasn't struggling. He was simply breathing. Barely. Eira slowly knelt beside him. So this is what they called a monster. She whispered. Her eyes softened. No. This is what they did to one. A sudden gasp echoed behind her. She spun around. A young boy, perhaps 8 years old, crawled from beneath another broken wagon. His clothes were torn. His cheeks were pale from cold. Bruises covered his wrists where chains had once rested. He stared at the wolf with frightened eyes before looking at Eira. Please. The boy whispered. Don't leave him. Eira gently helped him stand. What happened here? The child swallowed hard. They caught him months ago. They made him fight. They beat him whenever he wouldn't obey. They said people paid gold just to watch the beast bleed. His small voice trembled. Then, last night. What happened? The boy looked toward the ruined valley. Something attacked. I couldn't see. There was snow everywhere. The guards started screaming. Some ran. Some disappeared. When morning came, everyone was gone except him. Eira looked back at the white wolf. He had protected no one, attacked no one. He had simply been abandoned. Footsteps echoed through the snow. Several hunters from a nearby village appeared at the edge of the valley. The oldest among them immediately raised his spear. The beast. Another hunter pointed toward Eira. Get away from it. Kill it before it wakes. Voices quickly filled the valley. That's the cursed wolf. He's responsible for every missing traveler. Leave him. Let winter finish the job. Eira looked from the frightened villagers to the broken chains around the wolf's body. Nothing about this creature looked like a monster. Everything about him looked like a prisoner. One hunter stepped closer. If he lives, more people will die. Eira quietly stood. No. The hunter frowned. You've seen what he is. I've seen what was done to him. The villagers exchanged uneasy looks. The oldest hunter shook his head. Omega. You don't understand. Some beasts deserve mercy. And some deserve death. Eira answered without raising her voice. Then why was he chained before he was wounded? No one replied. She knelt once more beside the wolf. Carefully, she placed one trembling hand against the thick white fur covering his shoulder. It was colder than ice. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, one golden eye slowly opened. The valley became completely silent. Every hunter tightened his grip on his weapon. The orphan boy held his breath. The wolf didn't bare his teeth. He didn't growl. He simply looked at Eira. There was pain inside those ancient golden eyes. Exhaustion, loneliness, and something buried so deeply that even he seemed unable to remember it. For one impossible moment, neither of them looked away. Something silent passed between them. Not trust, not recognition, just the quiet understanding shared by two souls who knew what it felt like to be abandoned. The great wolf slowly closed his eye once more. His breathing weakened again. Without another word, Eira stood and picked up an old woodsman's axe lying beside the wagon. The hunters watched in confusion. She walked to the thick chains fastening the wagon to its broken frame. One swing. Then another. Iron cracked beneath repeated blows. What are you doing? One hunter shouted. She didn't answer. Finally, the last chain snapped free. Eira wrapped a heavy rope around the wagon and pulled with everything she had. It barely moved. Finn rushed beside her without being asked. Together, they dragged the impossible burden toward the narrow forest trail. The villagers stood frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing. One old woman whispered into the falling snow. That girl isn't bringing home a beast. She's bringing home fate. Behind them, hidden beneath the endless winter sky, the wounded white wolf remained unconscious. But somewhere deep inside the broken Alpha, something had already begun to awaken. The longest winter of his life had not ended. It had just found the one person willing to stay beside him. The journey through the forest was painfully slow. Snow reached almost to Eira's knees, and every step forward demanded every bit of strength she had left. The broken wagon groaned as she pulled it across frozen ground with a thick rope wrapped around her shoulders. Beside her, little Finn pushed from behind with all the determination his small body could offer. Neither of them spoke. Their breath turned into white clouds that disappeared into the storm. Behind them, the enormous white wolf remained completely still. Only the faint rise and fall of his chest reminded Eira that he was still alive. Hours passed before the familiar outline of her cabin appeared between towering pine trees. It was small, built from old cedar logs, with smoke curling gently from its stone chimney. The place had never been much, but it was warm, and warmth was the only thing that mattered now. Together they dragged the wounded beast inside. The cabin suddenly felt far too small. His massive body covered nearly half the wooden floor. Finn quietly closed the door against the howling wind. Will he wake up? The boy asked softly. Eira removed her wet gloves before kneeling beside the wolf. I don't know. She reached toward one of the silver arrows still buried beneath his shoulder. The wound around it had already turned dark, poisoned by silver that weakened every werewolf. She took a slow breath. This is going to hurt. Although the wolf remained unconscious, she spoke as if he could hear her. Perhaps some part of him still could. One by one, she removed the arrows. Each one slid free with terrible resistance. Fresh blood stained her hands, but she never rushed. She cleaned every wound with warm water and crushed winter herbs before wrapping strips of clean cloth around his injuries. Finn watched quietly from across the room. After several minutes he whispered. They laughed when he cried. Eira paused. Who? The traders. They said monsters don't feel pain. Silence filled the cabin. She looked at the countless scars hidden beneath the wolf's thick white fur. Some wounds were old. Some had healed badly. Others looked as though iron had rubbed against his skin for months without mercy. This wasn't the body of a killer. It was the body of someone who had survived endless cruelty. By nightfall, every arrow had been removed. Only the chains remained. They were worse than the wounds. Black iron cuffs had sunk deep into the flesh around his legs. Old skin had healed over parts of the metal itself. Eira stared at them with sadness. They never planned to let you go. Using a small hammer and chisel, she carefully worked at the rusted locks. It took nearly 2 hours before the first cuff finally broke apart. The heavy piece of iron hit the floor with a dull clang. For a brief second, the wolf released a long, exhausted breath. Almost as if his body had remembered what freedom felt like. Finn smiled for the first time. I think he liked that. Eira smiled gently. I think so too. Outside, the storm continued without mercy. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Days passed. Winter settled deeper over the mountains, trapping all 3 of them inside the tiny cabin. Every morning Eira prepared fresh medicine. Every afternoon she changed bandages. Every evening she cooked simple soup from dried vegetables and whatever game Finn managed to trap nearby. The wolf never woke completely. Sometimes his ears twitched. Sometimes his paws trembled as though running through forgotten dreams. Often he growled quietly in his sleep. Not with anger. With fear. One cold night Eira woke suddenly. The fire had almost gone out. Moonlight slipped through the small window, painting silver patterns across the cabin floor. She looked toward the wolf. He was awake. His golden eyes reflected the dying flames. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring into the fireplace. Completely motionless. As though searching for something hidden inside the fire. A memory. A face. A life he could no longer remember. Eira slowly added another log to the flames. The wolf glanced toward her. For several quiet moments they simply looked at one another. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Then, almost unbelievably, he lowered his head again, closing his eyes. Trust. It was only the smallest beginning. But it was enough. Weeks continued to pass. Finn slowly became less afraid. He even began reading aloud from one of Eira's old books while sitting near the hearth. The wolf always listened. Whether he understood the words or not, neither of them knew. One snowy evening Finn fell asleep while reading, curled beside the warm fireplace with the book still resting in his lap. The wind outside grew stronger. Cold air slipped beneath the old cabin door. Without making a sound, the giant white wolf slowly shifted his injured body. Despite every wound, despite every movement causing obvious pain, he stretched himself across the doorway, blocking the freezing draft before it could reach the sleeping child. Finn never woke. Eira noticed everything. She said nothing. Some acts of kindness were too precious to interrupt with words. That night, while everyone slept, distant wolf howls echoed beyond the mountains. By morning, travelers passing through the valley brought dangerous news. The Pack Council had made an announcement. Any person found hiding the white beast would be declared an enemy of every allied territory. Hunters had already begun searching cabin by cabin. Rewards were being offered. Fear spread faster than the winter wind. Finn looked nervously toward Eira. They'll come here. She quietly folded another clean bandage. I know. We should run. Instead of answering, Eira walked to the cabin door. She looked once at the endless forest covered in white. Then she closed the heavy wooden door. She slid the iron bolt firmly into place. Turning back toward the wounded beast, she spoke with calm certainty. As long as you're under this roof, no one will take you back to chains. Outside, the snow continued to fall without end. Somewhere deep within the silent Alpha, hidden beneath pain and forgotten memories, something stirred once more. For the first time in years, he was no longer surviving alone. The winter refused to loosen its grip. Day after day, snow gathered around the little cabin until only the chimney and a single narrow path remained visible. The outside world had become distant, almost forgotten. Inside, the rhythm of life was quiet and gentle. Eira prepared medicine each morning, Finn practiced reading by the fire, and the wounded white wolf rested in silence. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since they brought him home. His wounds were finally beginning to close. The fever, however, had only grown worse. Some nights he trembled so violently that the entire wooden floor seemed to shake beneath his enormous body. Other nights he whimpered softly in his sleep, as though reliving memories too painful to escape. Eira never left his side. She replaced cold cloths on his forehead, whispered calming words he probably couldn't hear, and prayed that the fever would break before it claimed his life. Then, just before dawn one bitter morning, everything changed. Eira entered the room carrying a bowl of warm broth. She stopped in the doorway. The giant white wolf was gone. The blanket covering the bed had slipped onto the floor. In its place lay an unconscious man. His long silver-white hair spread across the pillow like fresh snow. Deep scars covered his broad chest and shoulders, telling the same painful story the wolf's body had carried. Faint ancient markings glowed beneath his skin before slowly fading away. For a long moment, Eira simply stared. She had heard stories that powerful alphas could shift between wolf and human form. She had never expected to witness it. Finn hurried into the room behind her. His eyes grew wide. Is that him? Eira nodded quietly. Yes. The beast was never just a beast. Moments later, the stranger's fingers twitched. His breathing deepened. Slowly, golden eyes opened. They wandered across the unfamiliar cabin before finally stopping on Eira's face. He looked confused, lost, almost frightened. His lips moved with effort. Where? His voice was rough from disuse. Where is everyone? Eira knelt beside him. You're safe. You've been unconscious for weeks. He frowned, trying to remember. My home. His breathing became uneven. My people. He closed his eyes tightly. Nothing came. Only darkness. Only fragments. I don't remember. Pain crossed his face as though the missing memories hurt more than any wound. I remember fire. He took another shaky breath. Chains. His hands trembled. Screaming. Suddenly, he reached weakly into empty air. No. His voice cracked. Run. His fingers closed around nothing at all, as though trying desperately to hold the hand of someone who was no longer there. Then his strength disappeared. His arm fell back onto the bed. He slipped into exhausted sleep once more. The cabin became silent. Finn looked at Eira. Who was he talking to? She slowly shook her head. I don't think he knows. Over the following days, he remained trapped between sleep and memory. Sometimes he whispered about snow-covered battlefields. Sometimes he called out for soldiers whose names he could no longer remember. Once, in the middle of the night, he spoke a single sentence. Protect my sister. Then silence returned. Eira never questioned him when he woke. Instead, she simply sat beside the fireplace reading old books aloud while Finn practiced the alphabet nearby. The stranger listened with closed eyes, saying almost nothing, yet the peaceful sound of their voices seemed to quiet whatever storm lived inside him. For the first time in many years, he experienced something unfamiliar. Not fear. Not survival. Peace. But every morning, when he opened his eyes and found Eira caring for wounds he believed were beyond saving, one painful thought always returned. He didn't know who he was. And he could not understand why someone as kind as Eira had chosen to save a broken man who remembered nothing except loss. As the fire burned softly between them, Neither realized that the forgotten Alpha's memories were beginning to awaken, one fragile piece at a time. The truth buried beneath the snow was far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. Winter still ruled the mountains, but for the first time, the endless silence felt different. The stranger had begun walking again. His wounds had closed enough for short journeys, though every movement reminded him of the months, or perhaps years, his body had spent in chains. Some mornings he would stand outside the cabin, staring across the snow-covered forest as if expecting someone to call his name. No one ever did. Eira watched him quietly from the doorway. "You don't have to force yourself," she said gently. He looked toward the mountains. "I feel like something is waiting for me." "What?" He lowered his eyes. "I don't know." Those words had become painfully familiar. He remembered emotions far better than memories. Fear, responsibility, loss, but never the faces connected to them. A day later, Eira decided to visit a place she had not entered in years. Hidden high above the valley was an abandoned mountain library, built by the first Alpha Kings long before the current pack councils divided the territories. Few people even believed it still existed. "If we're lucky," she told Finn while packing a small satchel, "we might find old healing books." Finn grinned. "And maybe stories." She smiled. "And maybe stories." The stranger silently followed behind them. None of them noticed a pair of distant eyes watching from the trees. The climb took most of the morning. Snow covered the ancient stone staircase leading into the mountain. Ivy and frozen moss clung to weathered walls, and enormous wooden doors leaned slightly from centuries of neglect. Eira pushed against one of them. With a deep groan, the door slowly opened. Dust danced through pale sunlight filtering from broken windows. The air smelled of old paper and forgotten history. Thousands of books rested upon towering shelves. Many had fallen apart. Others remained untouched, waiting patiently for someone to remember them. Finn looked around in amazement. "I've never seen so many books." Eira laughed softly. "Neither has anyone else for a very long time." While Finn explored the lower shelves, Eira searched for old medical scrolls. The stranger wandered silently through the library. His fingers brushed across ancient stone pillars. Something about the place felt familiar. Not because he remembered it, but because his heart did. Suddenly he stopped. His breathing slowed. At the far end of the great hall hung a long row of faded portraits. Ancient Alpha Kings. Warriors. Queens. Royal families whose names had almost disappeared from history. Without understanding why, his feet carried him toward them. Eira noticed. She followed. Then, she froze. One portrait stood larger than all the others. The young king painted there had long silver hair, golden eyes, a scar across his left shoulder. The exact same scar standing beside her. Only one difference existed. The man in the painting wore a royal cloak trimmed with silver wolves. Below the portrait, faded words remained carved into polished stone. His Majesty Alpha King Caelan of the Northern Crown. Eira looked from the painting to the stranger. Back again. They were identical. Finn's voice barely escaped above a whisper. That's him." The stranger stared at the portrait in complete silence. His hand slowly lifted toward the painted face. "I know him." His voice trembled. "No. I am him." The words echoed through the empty library. Suddenly pain exploded inside his mind. Fire. Snow. Steel. Soldiers screaming. A woman crying his name. Then, darkness. He staggered backward. Eira caught him before he collapsed. "Easy." His breathing became uneven. "My head. I can't." The memories disappeared as quickly as they had come, leaving only confusion. Trying to understand what she had just discovered, Eira searched the nearby shelves. Hidden behind loose stones, she found an old leather journal wrapped carefully inside faded cloth. Its pages were brittle with age. Most of the writing had survived. As she carefully read aloud, the room grew colder. The journal described the final days before King Caelan disappeared. It spoke of secret meetings, broken peace agreements, Powerful council elders who feared a united kingdom more than another war. One sentence made her heart stop. If the king survives the summit, our authority ends forever. Another page mentioned payments sent to unnamed traders. No explanation followed. But Eira understood enough. Someone had betrayed their own king. The stranger wasn't captured by enemies. He had been sold. Before she could read another page, a sharp sound echoed through the library. Footsteps. Not one. Several. The stranger's head snapped toward the entrance. His body reacted before his mind could. He instinctively stepped in front of Eira and Finn, placing himself between them and the approaching danger. Heavy boots struck ancient stone. Masked hunters entered the great hall with drawn weapons. "There he is," one whispered. "The white beast." Another removed his hood. His face turned pale. "No. That's impossible." He recognized the portrait hanging above them, then looked back at the living man standing below it. Fear replaced confidence. The king. The hunters exchanged frightened glances. No one attacked. Not immediately. One slowly backed away. "We have to tell the council." He turned and ran. The others quickly followed him out into the snow. The library became silent once again. Eira looked toward the open doorway. Her heart sank. "They know where we are now." The stranger stood beneath his own forgotten portrait, staring at the empty entrance. He still couldn't remember his past. But somewhere deep inside his soul, the king had already begun to awaken. And before the next snowfall ended, every powerful enemy who had betrayed him would know one terrifying truth. The beast they had tried to erase from history had survived. The news traveled faster than the winter wind. By sunset, every watchtower across the northern territories had received the same message. The white beast had been found. Inside the great council fortress, towering walls of black stone stood against the endless snow. Massive fires burned inside iron braziers, yet the chamber felt colder than the storm outside. Around a long circular table sat the elders who ruled the allied packs. They wore expensive furs, polished silver badges, and calm expressions that hid years of deception. A young hunter knelt before them, still breathing heavily from his journey. "I saw him with my own eyes," he said. "The white wolf, he lives." Silence filled the room. Then one elderly councilman slowly rose from his chair. His name was Elder Varric. Years of power had carved confidence into his face, but for the first time in many years, fear flickered in his eyes. "Did anyone else recognize him?" he asked. The hunter lowered his head. "Yes, we found an old royal portrait inside the mountain library. He looks exactly like the lost Alpha King." Several elders exchanged uneasy glances. One woman gripped the edge of the table. "This cannot happen. If the people discover the truth, our authority is finished." Varric nodded slowly. 5 years earlier they had made a choice they believed no one would ever uncover. Instead of supporting a young king who dreamed of peace between rival packs, they had betrayed him. They had secretly handed him over to slave traders, expecting him to disappear forever. Then they rewrote history. They told every pack that their Alpha King had died protecting the kingdom. The people mourned. The council gained complete control. Now, the king had returned. Far away, inside the quiet cabin, Eira sat beside the fire while the wounded stranger stared into the flames. Since leaving the library, he had barely spoken. Fragments of memory continued appearing without warning. A battlefield buried beneath snow. A silver crown falling into blood. A little girl laughing as she gathered wildflowers beside a river. His hand slowly closed into a fist. "I failed someone." Eira looked at him. "You don't know that." "I do." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I just don't remember who." For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them had become familiar. Comfortable. Finn quietly entered carrying fresh firewood. "They're saying hunters are everywhere now." Eira nodded. "I expected that." The boy hesitated before asking the question that frightened him most. "Are they coming here?" Before Eira could answer, a distant wolf howl echoed through the valley. "Not one." Several search parties. The hunt had already begun. The next morning another announcement spread through every village. Messengers nailed fresh notices to market posts and pack gates. The white beast murdered the Alpha King years ago. Anyone sheltering the creature will be executed for treason. A reward of 500 gold coins will be paid for its head. The lie spread quickly because fear always traveled faster than truth. Even worse, the notice carried another name. Finn. The orphan boy was declared stolen property belonging to the slave traders whose caravan had been destroyed. The council intended to return him to chains. When Finn read the notice, his face turned pale. "They're coming for me too." Eira gently rested a hand on his shoulder. "No. They're coming for all of us." Across the room, the stranger quietly stood. His expression remained calm, but something had changed inside his golden eyes. He picked up his old cloak. "I'm leaving." Finn looked shocked. "What?" "If I disappear," he said quietly, "they'll stop hunting this cabin." Eira immediately stepped in front of the door. "No." He met her eyes. "I brought this danger to you." "You brought nothing. They'll destroy your life." She held his gaze without fear. "They already decided to." He fell silent. Then she took one slow step closer. "If they hunt you," she spoke with quiet certainty, "they'll hunt us anyway." The words struck deeper than any weapon. For the first time since waking inside the cabin, he stopped seeing Eira as the woman who had healed his wounds. He saw her as someone who had chosen to stand beside him when everyone else had chosen fear. Outside, snow continued falling over the silent forest. Inside, an invisible bond grew stronger. Neither of them knew it yet. But fate had already begun weaving their lives together, and soon, the entire kingdom would be forced to choose between the council's lie and the forgotten king who had finally found someone willing to believe him. Night settled over the frozen valley like a heavy blanket. The moon hid behind thick clouds, leaving only pale light reflecting across endless snow. The forest stood silent, but it was not the peaceful silence Eira had come to know. This one carried tension. Somewhere beyond the trees, horses moved slowly over frozen ground. Iron wheels creaked. Chains rattled. The sound stopped Caelan where he stood. He had been repairing the cabin roof when the noise reached him. His golden eyes narrowed, and without a word, he climbed down into the snow. Eira noticed the change in his expression immediately. "What is it?" He listened again. "Chains." Finn stepped outside, holding a small lantern. "I hear them too." A moment later, an elderly man emerged from the darkness. His clothes were torn, and frost covered his grey beard. He struggled to catch his breath before speaking. "I escaped," he whispered. "Another slave caravan. They're taking children south." His voice broke. "There are 12 of them, maybe more." Eira's heart sank. "Children?" The old man nodded. "They're only cubs. They've done nothing wrong." Silence fell over the cabin. Caelan slowly looked toward the distant mountains. Something burned inside him. Not rage. Resolve. "I won't let them disappear." Eira stepped closer. "You're still healing." "My body is." His voice became calm. "My conscience isn't." An hour later, they followed the narrow trail leading through the valley. Snow muffled every footstep. Ahead, torchlight flickered between the trees. The slave convoy moved slowly across the frozen pass. 3 wagons. 6 mounted guards. Iron cages covered with thick canvas. Small frightened voices drifted through the night. Finn swallowed hard. "They're younger than me." Eira reached for his shoulder. "You stay hidden until I call." He nodded, though fear filled his eyes. Caelan crouched behind a fallen pine tree, watching every movement. His breathing slowed. His wolf stirred beneath his skin. Not for violence. For protection. The lead guard laughed loudly. "Once we reach the border, these little wolves will bring enough gold to buy another convoy." Another guard grinned. "Funny how every pack claims slavery is forbidden. But nobody refuses cheap labor." The laughter echoed through the valley. Caelan closed his eyes. For one brief moment, he remembered another cage, another chain, another winter. His eyes opened again. This time they glowed like molten gold. Now, he whispered. Everything happened at once. A powerful white wolf burst from the darkness. The first horse reared in terror, throwing its rider into the snow. Before the remaining guards understood what they had seen, Caelan crashed into the lead wagon. Wood exploded. Iron hinges snapped apart. The frightened children screamed. Guards drew silver swords. Kill the beast. 3 soldiers charged together. Caelan met them head-on. He didn't strike to kill. He struck to stop them. One guard lost his weapon. Another crashed into deep snow. The third fled without looking back. Meanwhile, Eira raced toward the cages. Her fingers worked quickly at the heavy locks. "They're stuck," she whispered. Finn appeared beside her. "I found the keys." His small hands trembled as he unlocked the first cage. The frightened children refused to move. One little girl hugged her knees. "They'll catch us." Eira knelt beside her. "No. You'll never wear chains again." The girl slowly reached for Eira's hand. One by one, the children climbed out. Some cried. Some could barely stand. Finn gathered them together. "Stay behind me. I know the forest." At the center of the convoy, the slave master finally appeared. Unlike the others, he wasn't afraid. He wore a long black coat lined with wolf fur and carried a heavy silver whip. He looked directly at Caelan. "So, the famous beast still breathes." Caelan remained silent. The trader laughed. "You kings always pretend you're different. But sooner or later, you all become monsters." For a moment, the valley grew completely still. Then Caelan slowly walked toward the burning campfire. Without taking his eyes off the trader, he picked up the pile of iron chains that had once held the children captive. The chains were heavy, cold, covered in old blood. He threw every single one into the fire. The iron hissed as flames swallowed it. "I know what monsters look like," Caelan said quietly. "They're the ones who put children in cages." The trader raised his whip. Before he could strike, Caelan caught it with one hand. The leather snapped. The trader stumbled backward. He expected death. Instead, Caelan simply stepped aside. "Leave. Tell every slave trader what happened here." The man stared in disbelief. "You're letting me live. So you'll remember. And so others will hear." The slave master turned and ran into the darkness without looking back. Caelan then picked up a burning torch. He looked once at the wagons that had carried so much suffering. Then he set the first one ablaze. Flames spread quickly. Canvas caught fire. Wood cracked loudly. Soon the entire convoy burned against the snowy night, sending bright orange light high into the winter sky. The children watched in silence. For many of them, it was the first time they had ever seen the cages that imprisoned them disappear forever. As the fire roared, the elderly man who had escaped earlier slowly approached Caelan. His eyes widened. He stared at the silver-haired warrior for several long moments. Then, with trembling hands, he dropped to one knee. "My king." Caelan frowned. The words echoed through his mind. "My king." Suddenly, memories rushed back like a river breaking through ice. A throne room. Royal banners. Soldiers kneeling. A voice calling his name. "Long live Alpha King Caelan." His breath caught. He closed his eyes. At last, he remembered who he was. Not the beast. Not a prisoner. Not a forgotten legend. He was Caelan, the true Alpha King. And as the last chains melted into the flames behind him, it felt as though the chains around his own soul had begun to break as well. Winter no longer felt endless. Each morning, the snow melted a little more beneath the pale sunlight. Tiny streams of water trickled through the forest, and birds cautiously returned to branches that had been silent for months. The frozen world was beginning to breathe again. So was Caelan. His wounds had almost completely healed. The deep scars across his body remained, but they no longer controlled the way he moved. Every day he found another quiet way to help around the cabin. Before Eira woke each morning, he repaired loose wooden boards on the roof. He chopped firewood before Finn could lift the axe. He carried fresh water from the spring without being asked. He never spoke about these things. He simply did them. One morning, Eira stepped outside carrying a basket of herbs and stopped in surprise. The broken fence surrounding her small garden had been rebuilt. Fresh wooden posts stood firmly in the ground. Even the tiny gate swung smoothly on new hinges. She smiled without realizing it. "You fixed it." Caelan looked up from the hammer in his hand. "It needed fixing." "You didn't have to." His answer was simple. "I wanted to." Those few words stayed with her long after she walked away. Inside the cabin, laughter slowly replaced silence. The rescued children had found temporary shelter nearby, and they often visited Eira's home during the day. Finn had become their fearless guide through the forest, proudly showing them hidden streams and safe paths between the trees. One rainy afternoon, Caelan sat quietly outside carving pieces of cedar wood with a small knife. A little girl watched him curiously. "What are you making?" He looked down at the unfinished carving. "I'm not sure yet." She giggled. "A wolf." A few careful cuts later, a tiny wooden wolf rested in his hand. The little girl's eyes sparkled. "For me." He nodded. She hugged the little carving tightly before running back toward the others. Finn laughed. "I told you. You're just pretending to be scary." For the first time in many years, Caelan laughed too. It was quiet, almost unfamiliar, but real. That evening, snow began falling again, softer than before. Eira sat near the fireplace reading from one of the ancient books rescued from the mountain library. Caelan listened while sharpening a hunting knife. Neither felt the need to fill the room with conversation. The silence between them had changed. It no longer felt awkward. It felt safe. At one point, Eira reached across the table to hand him another book. Their fingers brushed. A strange warmth spread through both of them. Not painful. Not frightening. Just different. Caelan immediately pulled his hand back. He looked down in confusion. For the briefest moment, a faint silver symbol glowed across his wrist before disappearing. Eira quickly covered her own wrist. The same mark had appeared there. Neither said a word. Neither understood what they had seen. Later that night, the elderly librarian who had recognized Caelan as king quietly approached Eira while Caelan slept. "There is something I should tell you." Eira looked concerned. "What is it?" The old man smiled gently. "I've studied the oldest records. The moon goddess sometimes delays a mate bond." "Why?" "When one soul is too broken to recognize the other." Eira remained silent. The librarian continued. "Your king lost his memories. He lost his people. He even lost himself. If the bond had awakened immediately, he might never have believed he deserved it." Eira looked toward the sleeping Alpha. His face, usually guarded and unreadable, looked peaceful in the firelight. "So the bond waited," she whispered. The old man nodded. "It waited for hope." The following morning, Caelan stood outside watching the sunrise paint golden light across the melting snow. Eira stepped beside him without speaking. Together they watched the forest awaken. Neither reached for the other's hand. Neither confessed the growing feelings hidden inside their hearts. They simply stood together. Close enough to share warmth. Close enough that silence said everything words could not. Far above them, a single white wolf appeared on the distant ridge. It lifted its head toward the brightening sky and released a long, peaceful howl. Caelan closed his eyes. For reasons he could not explain, hearing that lonely call no longer made him feel alone. Because somewhere between the first snowfall and the coming spring, without either of them realizing it, two wounded hearts had already begun finding their way home to each other. Spring arrived quietly. The heavy snow that had ruled the valley for months began melting beneath warm sunlight. Water trickled through the forest, carrying away the last traces of winter. The frozen river flowed again, and patches of green slowly appeared beneath the white earth. For Eira, Spring brought more than warmer days. It brought answers. One morning, while gathering herbs near the old battlefield described in the ancient journal, she noticed something unusual. The melting ice had uncovered broken shields and rusted swords scattered across the valley floor. They had been buried beneath snow for years, hidden from every searching eye. "Finn," she called softly. "Come here." The boy hurried toward her. "I found something." Together they carefully brushed away the wet snow. Beneath it rested a weathered wooden chest reinforced with iron bands. Although damaged by time, its royal seal was still visible. Caelan stopped the moment he saw it. His heartbeat quickened. "I've seen that crest before." Eira carefully broke the frozen lock. Inside were neatly wrapped scrolls protected by layers of waxed cloth. Despite the passing years, the documents had survived untouched. She unfolded the first letter. Her expression slowly changed. "This can't be." Caelan stepped beside her. "What is it?" She swallowed hard before reading aloud. The letters carried official seals from several council elders. Each document recorded secret payments made to slave traders in exchange for a single unnamed prisoner. The final order was impossible to ignore. Deliver the Alpha King alive. His return must never be allowed. Silence settled over the valley. Finn looked from the letters to Caelan. "They sold you." Caelan didn't answer. He simply stared at the documents in disbelief. Every missing memory suddenly fit together. The peace summit. The ambush. The chains. None of it had been an accident. His own council had betrayed him. Eira gently folded the letters. The beast was never the villain. He was their victim. Word spread quickly. Messengers carried copies of the evidence from village to village. People who had once feared the white beast now questioned everything they had been told. Murmurs of anger replaced whispers of fear, and soon the entire kingdom began demanding justice. But inside the council fortress, panic took hold. The elders gathered once more, their faces pale as reports arrived from every territory. "The people know," one elder whispered. "They're asking for the true king." Another struck the table with his fist. "Then we end this before he reaches the capital." Outside, the snow continued to disappear beneath the spring sun. Inside the fortress, however, a different storm was beginning to rise. The truth had finally come out of the ice. Now, the kingdom stood on the edge of a reckoning that would decide whether lies, or justice, would rule the future. The road to the capital had never been so crowded. From every village, wolves gathered along the stone roads leading toward the council hall. Farmers left their fields. Hunters lowered their bows. Mothers carried children on their backs. Elders leaned on wooden staffs as they slowly climbed the hill overlooking the ancient fortress. No one had come to witness a coronation. They had come expecting a war. 4 days, rumors had spread across the kingdom. Some claimed the white beast was marching with an army. Others believed he would burn the council hall to the ground and execute every elder who had betrayed him. After everything they had done to him, most people believed revenge was inevitable. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Eira quietly watched the enormous black gates of the fortress. Beside her stood Finn, now stronger than the frightened boy she had found beneath the slave trader's wagon months before. He looked toward Caelan. "Are you sure you should go alone?" Caelan adjusted the simple grey cloak resting over his shoulders. Beneath it, he wore no royal armor. No crown rested upon his head. No sword hung at his side. "I have walked enough years carrying violence," he answered softly. "If I return today carrying the same thing, then they truly turned me into the beast they wanted." Eira searched his face. She could still see the scars left by silver chains. She remembered the broken wolf lying beneath the snow. Now she saw something completely different. Not a prisoner. Not a monster. A king. She stepped closer and gently straightened the collar of his cloak. "You don't have to prove who you are." Caelan smiled faintly. "I'm not going there to prove it. I'm going there so no child will ever wear chains again." Without another word, he walked toward the fortress. The crowd slowly parted before him. Not because they feared him, but because they respected him. Inside the council hall, Panic spread like wildfire. Messengers rushed between stone corridors while frightened guards tightened their grip on silver spears. Elder Varric stood before the great council table, his face pale with anger. "He came alone?" one elder asked. "Yes." "No army?" "None." Another elder laughed nervously. "Good. One man cannot defeat us." Varric wasn't smiling. "You've forgotten who that one man is." The massive doors opened with a thunderous groan. Caelan stepped into the chamber. Silence swallowed the room. For several long seconds, no one moved. The council members stared at the silver-haired Alpha standing before them. Some recognized the face they had tried so hard to erase from history. Others looked away in shame. Caelan calmly placed the recovered royal documents upon the center of the council table. "You know what these are." No one answered. "You ordered my capture. You sold your own king. You sold children. You buried the truth beneath lies." His voice never rose. It didn't need to. The truth carried enough weight. Outside, thousands waited in complete silence. Inside, the elders struggled to meet his eyes. Finally, Elder Varric stood. "You were weak. You wanted peace. Kings who seek peace destroy kingdoms." Caelan looked at him with quiet sadness. "No. Men who fear peace destroy them." Varric's expression hardened. He gave the smallest nod toward a nearby balcony. It was almost impossible to notice. Almost. A hidden assassin stepped from the shadows above. His silver crossbow was already aimed. The bolt flew through the air. Eira saw it first. Without thinking, she ran. "Caelan." She threw herself toward him. The bolt struck her shoulder instead. She cried out as she fell into his arms. For one terrifying heartbeat, everything stopped. Caelan looked down at the blood staining her sleeve. The old rage he had buried deep inside himself exploded. His wolf roared beneath his skin. Golden light flashed through the chamber. The elders stepped backward in fear. They expected the beast. Instead, Caelan carefully lowered Eira to the floor before standing once more. His eyes burned with power. But his hands remained empty. He leaped toward the balcony with breathtaking speed, disarming the assassin in a single movement. The crossbow shattered against the stone floor. The assassin collapsed, waiting for death. It never came. Caelan stepped back. "Take him alive." The guards hesitated. "My king." "I said alive." His calm voice echoed through the chamber. "The law will judge him." "The law, not my anger." Outside, the great doors opened. The people witnessed guards leading the assassin away in chains instead of carrying out another execution. A wave of stunned silence swept through the crowd. Then something extraordinary happened. One by one, the wolves lowered their heads. Not because they had been ordered to. Because they had chosen to. Inside the hall, Caelan returned to Eira's side. As he gently took her hand, a warm silver light spread across both of their wrists. Ancient symbols, hidden for months, finally appeared clearly beneath their skin. The mate marks. The moon goddess had waited until his heart chose compassion over vengeance. Only then did fate complete the bond. Caelan looked into Eira's eyes, relief replacing fear. "You saved me." She smiled through the pain. "I think. You've been saving me all winter." Around them, the council's lies collapsed like melting ice beneath the first light of spring. The forgotten king had reclaimed his kingdom. Not through revenge, but through mercy. And in that moment, every wolf present understood a truth they would tell for generations. The strongest alpha was never the one who conquered with fear. He was the one who had every reason to hate, and still chose justice. Weeks passed, and the kingdom slowly began to heal. The snow that had buried the mountains all winter disappeared beneath fields of wildflowers. Rivers flowed freely once again, and the lonely forest that had once whispered fearful stories about the white beast now echoed with the laughter of children. Near the edge of the woods, Eira's small cabin still stood exactly where it always had. Although the council offered to build a magnificent palace for their king, Caelan refused. "This cabin saved my life," he told them. A palace never did. Finn smiled every time he heard those words. The frightened orphan who had once hidden beneath a slave trader's wagon was now studying beside the kingdom's finest healers. Every afternoon, he returned to the cabin carrying new books, eager to learn everything Eira could teach him. "You'll become a better healer than I ever was," Eira said proudly. Finn laughed. "Only if you keep teaching me." Not far away, the rescued children played together beneath blooming trees. There were no cages, no chains, no fear. Their laughter was the greatest proof that the kingdom had finally begun to change. One quiet evening, Eira stood outside the cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold. The same doorway where she had once dragged a dying white wolf through the snow now overlooked a peaceful valley filled with life. Soft footsteps approached behind her. She didn't have to turn around. She already knew it was Caelan. He stopped beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the colors of spring. "I remember everything now," he said quietly. "The peace summit. The betrayal. The years in chains." He took a slow breath before looking at her. "And I remember the moment my life truly began again." Eira smiled gently. "When was that?" He reached for her hands. The glowing silver mate marks on their wrists shone brighter than ever before, no longer fading with time. "The day an Omega chose kindness over fear." His voice trembled with quiet emotion. "You didn't see a monster. You saw someone worth saving." Tears filled Eira's eyes. "I stayed because everyone else walked away." Caelan gently rested his forehead against hers. "And now," he whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never stand alone again." A warm spring breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the valley as wolves from every pack gathered below, not to bow before a ruler born into power, but before a king who had earned their loyalty through mercy. The beast was gone. The chains were gone. Winter had passed. And in the place where fear had once ruled, love, justice, and hope finally found a home.